This is a Momentum Media production.
Property Investing Insights, your authority on all things property investing, finance and wealth creation with Right Property Group.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Property Investing Insights. And I like that introduction because it reminds me, or it references a very important word, and that is authority. If you're investing in property, you want to make sure you're doing it with good authority. And authority comes in many shapes and sizes. From my journey through property and property investing, it becomes clear that the best authority comes in shaping your own direction and future, but surrounding yourself with the right people. A-team, whatever you want to call it. There's lots of language around it, but authority takes time, whether you're doing it yourself or you're choosing the partners that you want to partner with to drive your property portfolio forward. And be careful out there, because there are some people that may seem to have great authority and they're all over the social media and telling you all the things that you want to hear, but they might not actually have the scar tissue required to actually have good authority or good agency to support you as someone. And I don't want to get off on a negative note with that, but we're in a market right now where there's a lot of people talking about property. Some of them know what they're talking about, and I'd say others don't know what they're talking about. So you need to make sure that your sphere of influence, where you choose to get your information from, is from people with authority and the right amount of authority. So anyway, we'll kick off with that. Joining me in the studio, Steve Waters and Victor Kumar, they're directors at Right Property Group. I'd say these guys have somewhat authority in the market. They've been doing it for many years, probably 2 decades. My age in you guys. Guess authority helps with age.
2
Steve?
decades. Authority. Age.
20 market cycles.
Probably more.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, because it's been a lot of years.
Too many years.
Do you know what though? It flies because it's never just the same. There's something different every week, every month, every year. Lurch from crisis to crisis, good times to good times. And that's what keeps it exciting, to be honest with you, because when you have that ever-changing environment, it's not a one plan just sails through all instances. And so it keeps you on your toes. You're ever adjusting, and dynamics, data, and all the facets and components of the asset class are just always changing, and therefore so do you.
This is, probably never stand still, but do you get fatigued by it all, Victor? Do you reckon, do you ever sit there going, I'm sick about talking about what's going to happen with property. I'm just going to do stuff because I know it's the right thing to do, and stop having to be in conversations around what's going to happen, this, that, and the other, and musing and crystal ball gazing and all that sort of stuff, where you just love it that much?
Look, I definitely don't talk at the barbecues.
You don't?
Right? I tend not to tell people, if they don't know me, what I do. And often that's a blessing, because then you're sort of a fly on the wall. You look at what other people are saying about property and their opinions, and how you need to buy in this area, and how you should be buying in this state. All of those is very interesting, and it gives you the pub test.
You must hear some clangers where you just sit there going like, God, what are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone ever ask for your opinion though? Like, not knowing. So, if you get in a property conversation, everyone's like, this, that and the other. Does anyone go, what do you think, Victor? I don't know what you do, but what do you think about property?
Oh, I had one better. I had a guy try and entice me to buy a house and land package because I was working for someone.
What did you say? Tell me more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I milked it to the hilt. And then unfortunately, one of my friends came over and reintroduced me to him, and you watch the lead balloon drop.
Did he go?
Yeah, I didn't hear from him from the rest of the party. Yeah, but we're talking about change, and how we see these changes happening every week in property, and with Steve and I being around for quite a while in terms of many cycles, these changes are something that we can reference back to the yesteryears. Yes, it was the change now that looks new, but it was dressed differently back then, right? So we can get to the core of it and say, okay, this is where this piece fits. This is what we need to do, and this is the likely outcome of this change in the market right now.
And I get a bit of a hard time. You guys know me pretty well, but, I'm a big student of history. And I'll read anything historical, right? And no matter where you look, there's lessons, right?
Yep.
And there's so many quotes around it, so many famous people saying, if you want to determine what the future looks like, you need to only look back in history and you'll be able to find all the clues, right? Or versions thereof of that quote. And being a student in history, it helps you shape strategy, it helps you shape perception, helps you shape how you choose to approach stuff with clues on how things may play out. And back to this point around authority, particularly in the market that we're in right now, which is, we'll try and describe it shortly, but you must draw on all those lessons for the past because that is the leverage of authority. If you haven't done that, it's hard to get authority.
Very much so. Very much so.
What's really interesting about that point is that whilst history leaves clues for the future, it's only a theory-based, I guess, lesson. And until you actually experience that moment in time where you then can bolt on theory and practical, it's very hard to believe. Yeah, the big one for me when I first started was that, property doubles at a point in time. Let's just call it 10 years. Yeah, when I bought my first property for $105,000, I had a real hard time believing that thing was ever going to be worth $210,000.
Yeah.
And then $420,000 and so on. But it does happen. Or if that's on a positive note, but on a negative side of things is when, I don't know, go back to the GFC. Will we ever get out of this? Go back to APRA. Go back to the end of the low doc loan. Go to COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Go to now. Until you've experienced these cycle changes and the ramifications of whatever that moment in time is, theory's theory. You've got to convince yourself that it'll actually be okay and this will do this.
Well, a real recent example is the interest rates, right? So everyone was lulled into a sense of security saying that, 2%, we can buy property, we can afford property that we're never able to afford to. Whereas, Steve and I were advising our clients to say, hey, this is just temporary. Historically, it's sitting around 5.5%, 6%. And here we are, right? So there's always that history allows you to prepare for the future.
If you believe in it.
If you believe in it.
Yeah.
And if you actually take action and not put your head in the sand and say that, it's not going to happen this time around. It will happen. It just gets dressed differently because, of course, times are changing, information flows faster and education is there, but it still happens just the same.
My view is being comfortable with change, being comfortable we're talking about property in markets, environments, being able to have gone through many things yourself, but also being a student of history and looking how things play in the future. It gives you great leverage for taking action. That's the important point. You sit around and talk about property forever, right? You actually got to take action.
Absolutely.
You got to be in the game to win the game and play the game. And the more you do of stuff, the greater your risk appetite because you probably have greater control over stuff because of that experience or ability to be comfortable in the grey where you might not know, but because of what you know that you can navigate through certain things. So therein lies the opportunity in this market. And we'll try and identify it now. But the point is the size of the problem, i.e., what's in front of you right now will create the size of the opportunity. And this is a huge mindset. It's a huge mindset thing for a lot of people is that don't go chasing problems. However, if you're comfortable with problems, that's where you could really get the greatest growth.
Yep.
And in property, like that, at a personal level, that works. Just sitting there somewhere where you are a little bit uncomfortable is where you're going to get growth and change. Same thing applies in property. So, do you go out hunting where these problems are right now, or do you just have a comfortable perception towards the market we operate within and keep a nose out because there will be opportunities coming down? There's going to be horses for courses, isn't it?
Yeah, look, going back to my earlier point around both Vic and I having experienced all these different moments in time throughout history with property and those different market cycles, we now know that at certain times there are going to be opportunities and you need to act. Now, there's a risk associated with that to some degree because that risk is an illusion at the end of the day. The more comfortable, the more educated you are about that risk, it may not be risky to somebody else, but it may be for you. And today's a really good example of that because, yes, we have some challenges as investors or potential property purchasers, which is based in and around finance, whether it be to get it or to hold it.
Yep.
But I would be very, very surprised if the majority of people don't know what's on the back end of that as a result in the years to come. So whether you activate now, whether you can get to a point where you can purchase, let's call it today, the opportunity is tomorrow, but you need to do it today, figuratively speaking.
Yeah.
And you do become more comfortable with it as you've experienced these different market cycles because you always know what's on the other end of it, whatever the crisis is at that point in time.
So the point is, Vic, And you mentioned it, it's the same problems just wrapped up or dressed differently. So let's talk about the problem with the real estate market in Australia today. And there's a couple of things which are sort of shaping the dynamics of it at this moment in time. And we've been talking a lot about it on this particular podcast, Property Investing Insights, for many, many years. A lot of it is continues, a lot of it is new, and it's specific to this particular environment. We have immigration on the rise. That's good for Australia. We have record low vacancy rates. We have an environment where it's tough to get finance. If you're positioned right where you can get finance, but it's tougher to get finance. You've got a building sector in a state of flux. Development, it's not very economical at the moment. And when you sort of intersect that with intransigence or lack of willingness to change the laws and the rules around development by local councils, it's hard to get anything done. So this is all exacerbating. This is all like a cauldron, which is burning away, which is making it tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher for Australians to potentially buy real estate, but also access real estate as renters. So that's the environment we're in right now. Is that unique, or is that sort of dressed up a bit differently from problems in the past?
Now, it's never unique, right? The moving parts to property investing is always the same. And it's just a supply and demand and all of the parts that make investing, i.e. finance, supply and demand, your availability of property, construction, all of those things, right? So one of the key things that we need to remember is that opportunity always comes dressed up in problems. We just need to know which problems to ignore and which problems to solve in a cost-effective way, cost-effective to you, right? So an opportunity that's suitable to you might not be suitable for someone else. And if you look at the market as it's changing, right, one of the biggest opportunity, we'll talk about the baseline, but one of the things that no one's talking about right now is what's happening 1st of October, which will change the investing arena straight away.
What happens?
Which is basics changes, right? So you need to now have 7-star rating on your construction, which means it pushes up construction. If you look at Sydney in the Southwest Corridor, by the time you add in the infrastructure charges that is coming, the water charges that are coming, and the basics, you're talking straight away about $157K added to the construction cost.
Of anything.
Right.
So you look at that, right? And now let's just overlay a couple of other components if we're going to go down that path. So we've got the government's housing accord where they want to build the 1.2 odd million houses. Affordable houses.
Only $1 million
and there's the
each.
problem. Over 5 years. Right? Then we have the equity scheme for both new construction and existing dwellings, all coming online roughly at the same time.
Yeah.
We're only now just starting to work through the bottlenecks of materials to build. We've still got a labour
shortage, huge
component shortage, right? Try and convince me that when they flick the switch and say, right, let's construct.
It's a good idea.
Well, no, try and convince me of that. But try and convince me that, or sway my opinion and bolt on Victor's basic cost, that the cost of construction isn't going to go up by another 20 or 30%. On top of that.
Yeah. It's just uneconomical.
Supply and demand. It's just
supply and demand.
Right. So now if we bring that back to the topic, I guess, opportunities.
So you said opportunities always wrapped up in
problems. Yeah. So the problem here is there's going to be a cost escalation, right? So what's the opportunity here? Me as an investor, I'm going to go to all these people that have speculated on these construction sites or these development sites, and they can't construct because now the cost is blown out so much.
Correct.
Pick them up.
So you're going to buy those properties they've been sitting on for the basis of development. They can't do it. So that means they've probably bought at X, they'll come down to Y.
Yep.
You sit around and wait until development costs change again. Might be 10 years. And then you cash in.
Or find a way to solve it.
And so there's the opportunity. Or the other opportunity might be that you construct as quick as you can now.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you're in that position to do
but
so.
I was reading a thing the other day, and whether or not it's accurate, but someone was saying that the only way you're going to accelerate building or construction in Australia is for property prices to go up.
I saw that article.
Because it's the only way that's going to make it economical for builders to build.
You know what? When I read that article yesterday.
Think about that, right?
That's true.
It is true.
Because they're not going to build unless they're going to get the return. They can't build unless they get the return. Therefore, they can't get the finance unless the return is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the percentage.
Well,
they
you're not
want
going to be able to you can't get finance. If you say, hey, here's my feasibility study, and the bank's going to go, you're not making any money on this, man. I'm
Where
not
are your
funding
pre-sales?
that. Yeah, where's your pre-sales?
Which is how development works.
Or the other side of the argument is that should naturally, maybe this is the opportunity, and the problem is that should organically drive prices up, which is counter-cyclical to what everyone is thinking right now.
And this is the point. I mean, that's the topic.
So they're focusing on the immediate rather than what's possible in the future if you address the immediate.
Correct. And therein it lies the topic. Yeah, for those that are the size of the problem will dictate the size of the opportunity. It's as simple as that. And the opportunity, which comes in the years to come, but it's now.
So,
it's before all
don't
these
chase today. You got to chase.
You want the results tomorrow.
You got to chase tomorrow with this mindset.
Yeah, but you need to put yourself in a position today.
Yeah.
So whether that means, if we're going to be perfectly blunt, and actually we'll use ourselves as an example and our clients, we're buying as much as we can today because we know what happens tomorrow. And that's the benefit of, I guess, multiple cycles and 2 decades or thereabouts having done it. So, but people get clouded by what's happening right now in terms of these challenges. And I'm not saying that everybody should buy. It's like person by person.
Buy.
If you can.
Yeah.
And as long as you can hold. Very big difference, actually.
Yeah.
So it could be easy to buy, but can you actually control the asset safely?
So I guess it's this idea of the size of the problem will create the size of the opportunity. So, Victor, on that basis then, I would say, and so everything comes back to supply and demand, right? Yep. Because there's less developers in a market looking for developmental or blocks that can be developed, that means there's less pressure on those properties right now. Are you guys out there looking for development sites because there's less demand for them right now?
We always look, as part of the portfolio, we're always looking for that tuck-away property that we come back to at some point in time, right? Yeah. And whether it's a good market or bad market, there's always someone that has overspecced something and thought they'd be able to get it through without knowing the full process and the soft costs of developing, right? Even if it's something as simple as a granny flat. There's a lot of people that sit on sites that they were going to put a granny flat on it at some point in time. Then they realize, hang on, I need to come up with all of this money from my pocket before the financier kicks in.
Yeah.
Overlay that with how hard it is to get money and whether they can even qualify. All of a sudden, they've got a property that they had accounted for that extra income to come in to help hold on to it. But now they can't. And now the rates have gone up. They're in principal and interest. And because they can't refinance or change to a different lender, they're now hurting. And so they start offloading. And usually the saying is true that the darkest hour is just before dawn, right? So finance will change. We don't know whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, but it will change. It'll flow easier. And when it does, it'll allow you to refinance, it'll allow you to restructure mortgages, it'll allow you to move the pieces in terms of if it's development pieces within a portfolio or purchasing another dwelling or renovating.
Yeah.
This will solve itself if you give it time. And that's what people don't take into account. They panic on what's happening right now without, well, first of all, they're approaching it with, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z without understanding that there is a lot more letters before the X, Y, and Z that they need to address before they come to the X, Y, and Z, right? So not understanding those steps. Then they're not understanding also the cost of implementing that strategy and the decision-making process of implementing that strategy. And most often than not, they leave their run too late to get onto these advanced strategies. Or even getting into just a basic property, right? They wait for the full social proof to develop within their circles to then jump onto the market. So as an example, there would be, following people that are buying in, say, Brisbane or Perth or Sydney for that matter, or even Victoria, right? So, the normal playing grounds, and they try and jump in after someone's made 100,000, 200,000, try and buy that property at the price that their friend had bought 6 months ago, 2 years ago. And thinking that they'll be able to jag a property at that price, not taking into account the market movement up or down, the strength of the market there and how they're shaping their offers within that market. And all of that then creates the opportunity for people like us to come into that market and say, hey, this is how we're going to adjust our offers, our approach in this market. But it could be totally different at the other end of the country where the market is a little bit different.
The thing with problems is that problems aren't problems forever, largely. So
they're very temporary.
They are very temporary, and whether it's personally or it's with property markets, one of the problems which is impacting property market capital growth at the moment is there's less buyers in the market because finance is hard to get. Is there a direct correlation between access to finance and property price growth? So,
Absolutely.
So there's less people around at the moment with finance. So, the darkest hours before dawn, finance will become easier in time. No one knows when, right? So how long is that problem going to exist that you can take advantage of, as in less people in the market with finance to buy? So time is of the essence. How long you got?
No, nobody knows the answer to that question. I mean, that you compound that by, if you look at the rolling average, we're some 30 to 35% less stock on market today than what we were 4 years ago.
But they're saying now it's mad, like the spring selling season, there's stock coming on all over the joint.
There is more stock coming on, but the depth of the buyer market, depending on where you are.
So it's an equilibrium.
Is at a point of balance, It's a very general statement because it is a market within a market.
Yeah.
But if I just come back to my point where we're some 30 to 35% less stock on market than what we were 4 years ago, when we had 1.2 million less people in the country at that point in time as well, right? So all of these components are just...
That's huge.
They're gathering momentum to create the issues that we have today. And why that's relevant to your comment around, well, is it easy? Are we going to see growth? Will we see growth more so than what we're seeing now when finance becomes easier? The short answer is yes. People have this, or the media has a tendency to say that growth is directly in correlation to the cost of money. Sure, there's some component to that. There's some meat to that. But it's the flow of credit that really helps to dictate growth.
Yeah.
And I've given the example before. My first property, 105,000, rates were 7%. In the preceding 12 months, it went to 9%, but that property doubled in value in that 12 months.
So it's independent of interest rates.
It's independent of interest rates if the flow of credit is there. The problem that we have today, and a market that's still growing, generally speaking, depending on the areas, is that we have the cost of money, which is circa 6.5% to the consumer, but the flow of credit isn't necessarily there where it should be to allow people to purchase. And it's a chicken or egg scenario for the RBA and inflation and what have you. But if we're getting growth at this point in time, imagine what happens when the flow of credit gets a little easier. So whether that be a reduction in the buffer rate by some ways or means, whether it be
it's sort of happening around the fringes at the moment.
It is. The banks are doing their best to get the money out there. Like they don't want to save money. They don't want to have money in their own bank accounts. They want it out there working, right? It's as simple as that.
Well, this is, and the funny thing with banks, and if you don't know about it, like, the banks don't have all their money sitting in a vault somewhere. They've got to have a bit of it available at any point in time, but the rest of it is out there, and most of it in mortgages, right?
Correct.
That's how they make money. That's how they get shareholders' return.
Yeah, whatever it is. I don't know what the number is. Is it 1 to 13 or something like that?
Yeah, which is very little, And this is when you run on banks, everyone wants their money. No, doesn't work that way.
It's a great business model if you can get it.
Business model if you can get it.
But a piece of it. But look, this whole problem of today and I guess tomorrow's opportunity is very, very obvious to a lot of people. And I would say to the majority of people.
You reckon people are viewing it that way? You reckon people are going, hey, it's a good opportunity? Because you speak to most people that go, don't touch property. You're a mug if you touch property at the moment.
You're just hanging around the wrong people, mate.
Maybe I'm hanging. Maybe that's my problem.
Zero friends.
Zero friends. All my social media friends, Steve.
Oh, but you're a finfluencer. It's I truly do believe in going back to your barbecue piece earlier on. When we go out and if you go to a barbecue or whatever it may be, property's always brought up in some way, shape or form. Yeah. And when you sit back and listen, some people are definitely doing it tough. Can't deny that. But in the next sentence, it's such a crisis. It can only go up. But when that's just a little bit of narrative as opposed to truly believing it and taking action if you can is a different story. I would suggest that most people do, and especially now because of social media and quick information and
it's funny how quickly. I was chatting with some politicians the other day, and
definitely change your group of friends, mate.
They got no problems. Don't worry about that. And this idea of sort of misinformation is massive, right?
It's huge.
And property is probably one of the hotbeds of misinformation. You know, it's the propagation of acceleration of misinformation in property because it is so connected to most Australians, you know, depending what algorithm, you know, you're based on. And that could be analog or digital, right? If your algorithm is you're hanging around, I'm going to generalize here, like inner city, Sydney, drinking fancy cocktails and lattes, you know, your algorithm, as in the sphere of influence you have around you, giving you information, you're probably banging the table saying we need to stop rents going up. You know, it's these evil landlords wrecking us. It's a rental crisis, and there's people living in cars and stuff. And then you get on the other pathway, you hang around property investors, everyone's sitting around going, i.e. this particular podcast going, yes, there is a problem, but here is the opportunity. You know, and this is the world that we live in right now. Every Australian has a view on property. So back to my earlier point, make sure the authority of the information you're getting is the right stuff for you.
Mm-hmm.
But whether it's right or...
we might be horribly wrong. I reckon there's people listening to us going, these guys don't know what they're talking about.
For sure, there would be. But
stop rents.
But yeah, we're only a very small segment of the information market, right? It's like the social media platforms, and going back to your point around the propagation of information... It's because of that technology, because of that speed in transition of information now, and people being far more entrepreneurial than what they were 10 years ago. Yeah. They're looking for a reason to improve their position, whether it be crypto, shares, business, property, whatever it may be. They're looking for something and they're educating themselves far more now. And so that transition of information affects markets a lot more quickly than what they did yesteryear. And we've done multiple podcasts around that. But back to my point, I think there is a massive cohort of people, the majority of people that have, even if they only have some thought process in and around real estate, know what's going to happen. It's just a matter of when is it going to happen.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that.
Yeah, I think what the problem really is with the ordinary consumer is that they're looking at only one piece of the play, right? So they're focused on, say, finance, or just focused on the inability to put an offer in because they get smashed to the curb when they're trying to negotiate, because they're trying to do something new, right? But they're not taking themselves out of that equation and taking a helicopter view to look at the entire play and how the pieces are moving to say, okay, yeah, I know it's hard to get onto a property because everyone's trying to. I know it's hard to get finance, but can I do this? Can I get finance from not my favorite bank? It is probably a bank I've never heard of, but the interest rates are palatable. And I know that I'd be able to hold on to this for the next couple of years. And I've done the sum, so I can reverse engineer it. And can I go into a different market outside of my comfort zone and not buy in my own backyard, so long as it makes sense? And it could be a state that's not favored in the social media right now and not talked about as often because people can't really, people want to spruik on their wins. They don't want to spruik on the not so sensational, the slow moving, the better properties that'll perform over a period of time. They want the flash in the pan because that's got more likes and more shares on Facebook when you put it up.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Going back to your point, Phil, around hanging around with some politicians and having a chat around the housing sector, what fascinates me is they're very quick to blame everybody else when their own implementation fails. Yeah. And
did you see how it's very
I know.
That's politics, though. So
I saw that. Did you see? You pick up on that? Yeah, I saw
he's
that.
even got his arm folded now.
I know. He's
just comfortable.
It's I have a hard time believing that they truly believe in what they're talking about in terms of an end result.
You know what? I think that view might be a bit misaligned. I think they actually really care.
I didn't say they didn't care.
And I'm not defending politicians by any means, but
yes, you are straight off the bat. Phil.
No, I'm not. No, but
I think he's going to make a run for Kirribilli personally.
Yeah, quite possible.
North Sydney. Yeah, whose old seat is that? Can't remember. Zimmerman, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I think having sort of knocked around politics a bit, like the politicians coming out trying to solve housing issues. And I think it's a motherhood issue for all politicians, I think, because down in their electorates, whether it's local government, state government or federal government, the big thing, and one of the people I was chatting with the other day is a shadow treasurer, and they're going like, and this is, I guess, the whole of the Liberal Party, like this is what everyone's talking about at grassroots level right now is cost of living and cost of housing, more so than ever before. So I think what you've got at the moment is this cycle of every politician is now more in tune with it at a local constituents level, and therefore they're having a voice, and therefore you're getting a whole bunch of mixed ideas about how to go about
And the media doesn't
fixing
help.
it and solving it. And the media exacerbates it. They sit there. So rather than just some people having a voice trying to resolve what is a inverted commas housing crisis, every single politician now is copying it when they go to any town hall saying, why is it so expensive? I can't afford to live. You got to stop housing. Mortgage rates are too high. Power bills are like, that is the key. That's the issue that everyone's talking about right now. So all decision making now is done by this massive committee of people trying to work it out. This exacerbates the size of the problem. So, the housing accords, people coming out now saying, we'll do this. You go, well, that might suit 10% of the population, but what about the other 90% of the population who don't want that? I don't know how they're going to resolve it, particularly around building, because I think the crux to everything is that we need more houses in Australia.
Like yesterday.
So let me be clear on the point that I made. I didn't.
Yeah.
My point is, I think they care because they have to, and
Because they
especially
want to care. They don't have to care. I think they largely want to care or do care.
Oh, they do care, but they have to care.
Yeah.
And especially
That's their job to care.
Correct.
Yeah.
However, their solutions to the problems, which the past governments over the last 30, 40 years have really been the cause of this. Take social housing, and a lack thereof. Their solutions to the problems have been these solutions have been created in the back rooms without the right input. Mm-hmm. Correct. So a group of people that wouldn't know a front door from a back door, maybe with some input from big developers, say, well, here's an idea.
You got to think also, you got to put this in a realm of development's always been sort of it's always operated in the grey in Australia.
Mm. Correct. Right. So actually, I was going to say something all right.
Yeah.
Which is not the solution.
It's not the solution
to the problem. It's a good bit of noise to placate those that are asking, what are you going to do about it? Which, to be fair, is the majority of Australia. But it's not a solution.
No, so I think what happens is that with the political approach, you're trying to fix things too fast. So you're not going back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals are strip back the cost, get rid of the red tape, make property ownership easy, make the availability of the retail investor, so your mum and dad, their ability to add more accommodation to the rental pool a whole lot easier rather than trying to constrain it the other way. So as an example, Queensland was trying to tax landlords in terms of rental free. We fixed that, right?
Yeah,
if you look
40 seconds.
If you look at the construction industry, you've got several levels of red tape right down to council level.
Yeah.
We need to get rid of all of those, make it far more easier without compromising quality, right? And that'll solve the problem. And that's something that can't happen as a flash to say, hey, yes, we're going to build 20,000 new homes, right? It needs to be staged and checks and balances put in place. So this really becomes a 10-year plan as opposed to, we'll solve housing crisis within the next 2 years by building.
Yeah, and that's the madness, right? Because the political cycle and how it operates in Australia is that we're trying to solve a problem for the political cycle we're in right now. When's the next elections, right? Like where we are right now, someone back in the 70s and 80s should have been looking at this, right?
Yes.
And so here we are today, 2023. We need to be thinking about 2050. Now, we're all taxpayers, right? You'll see, we've stood up this future housing development, whatever the latest flavour of the month is about what the future of housing is going to look like in Australia. It comes back to input. And this is my experience in and around government and politics is that decision-making is done in a bubble. And the bubble is politicians who largely are career politicians. There's not many current federal politicians who are genuinely come up through outside of politics. They were involved in student politics. They were involved in university politics. They were political staffers for a period of time and then they become a minister, right? You speak to any minister today's advisors, they're people on that same pathway and that same journey. Student politics, get yourself a university degree, go and be a staffer for a politician. With you in one day in time, I will also be the next generation politician. We're not getting the right inputs.
Yeah.
Now,
we don't want to make unpopular decisions.
Don't want to make unpopular decisions. Now, they'll say, well, they canvass the opinions of their constituents by doing X, Y, Z, right? Yeah, fair enough. They do that to try and help shape decision making. But all they do is create new committees to do assessments on, say, future housing. Those committees are career public servants who probably haven't ever been out in the workforce doing normal stuff, right? So we have a big problem in Australia that we're not getting the right inputs on decision making. We need business people. We need talented business people outside of it. We need people who have normal jobs, who have been in the normal workforce helping shape decision-making in Australia. And we don't have that right now. This is the reason why in 20 years' time we're going to be talking about the same problems we have
The
today.
problem is politics treats the symptom, not the cause.
True. And coming all the way back, we need people with battle scars to make the decisions, help make the decisions because they've gone through it.
And we don't have that.
But the people that make those hard decisions, if they get in, don't necessarily last.
No, they don't.
Because they get chased out because they're not the norm.
And it's not popular because they'll do the hard yards now.
I'm generalising, by the way, but
of course.
But people who come out of the political bubble and the ecosystem that come into politics, they normally get chased out by people who are threatened by them. And they do it in many different ways. They go, this person here was a business person. Well, look at their tax returns from 20 years ago or something or other, right?
Yeah.
It's just not the way it works.
But it adds to the problem in terms of what we're talking about today. And as I said, treating the symptom, not the cause. If we were real about this, we'd do the hard yards now for 20 years' time.
We should do.
But we won't.
Get the pain now for the future.
Yeah, we won't. And I guess at the end of the day, coming back to, the problem versus the opportunity, the easiest way I would describe on how to decipher whether you think it is a problem or an opportunity is what's the difference? Is it signal or noise?
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Can be as easy as that. And I believe we've got just about every signal you could possibly need.
Yeah, in fact, taking on that vein, Steve, right? You and I have been investing for best part of 2.5 decades, right? And never before has all of the ingredients come together into this perfect storm right now. Of course, we're getting sidetracked by the noise of finance or shortage of property or immigration. You put all of that together. We just needed 3 ingredients to restart the market, right? One was the availability of finance. The other was immigration or demand, right? And the third was finance. And the finance is about to click in.
Government intervention.
Government intervention.
Do you reckon the finance is...
It has to.
So there's a certain immediacy around changes in finance, do you reckon?
I reckon.
Purely because it's stifling activity.
I think it has to be. Yeah, especially if the economy contracts, right? I think we're in a per capita
So we're not sort of a hold pattern because we start looking at inflation. We've done the hard yards with the inflation. Want the waters to settle a little bit before you're going to power ahead again.
It's a good point because back to some pollies I was chatting with the other day. I can't remember how they framed it, but they said we're actually in a recession if it wasn't for immigration.
Correct.
Yep.
And that's the key point. If we didn't have the immigration as is right now, we'd be in a recession.
But
that's what's fueling growth.
We need the immigration because we don't have the labour force, and that also adds to the.
But we can't
Correct.
put them anywhere. Then we have a big productivity problem. I think I saw a report today that productivity is the worst it's been since 2016 or something or other. Right? This is what you get for 1 hour of activity from someone. It's the worst it's been in a long, long time.
Correct.
Long time.
And consumer confidence is also down to, I guess, the lows of the GFC. Worse.
Yeah.
So it's a
big problem, but it's probably a big opportunity there.
Well, and there it is, right? But I think at the end of the day, and coming back to Vic's point in and around finance, eventually it will have to loosen up.
Yeah.
It has to. And when it does.
But that's APRA just pulling the chocks out going, okay, make it a bit easier.
And it might not even be around
That's the signal.
rates. Correct. It may be about the buffer rate.
I think it's got to be around a buffer because it's getting relaxed already. But this is people with good credit ratings doing refinancing, right? To get people out of mortgage prison,
Yeah. Well, the banks are doing their best. The banks don't want to see people fail.
No, And they don't like foreclosure. But I think you've said it, there's a lot of real estate agents now who are doing sort of bank in sort of repossessed properties that the banks don't want them to put foreclosed property or whatever. Like they're trying to mask it at the moment. They don't want to, whether that's sort of scaremongering or whatever. The banks probably trying to protect themselves, taking properties away from struggling Australians who took on mortgages that were too big.
And then where are those poor people, where are they supposed to live?
Well, yeah, they're renting, right?
Where?
In your investment properties.
Yeah. So you get that squeeze
And you keep
happening.
upping the rents on them.
Yeah. So we see this in every cycle. We see this compression factor, right? So you've got got finance is really easy. So they buy this build property that's just outside of their comfort zone. Then the rates change or life changes or the economy changes. And then they have to sell or rent it out and move to a less expensive area. Right? So you get that compression factor until you get to that sweet spot where you can't really go any further out. And you can't go any further in. You're fairly close to all of the employment nodes. And this is across all states, right? You're fairly close to all the employment nodes. And that area normally bounces, right? And then that restarts the cycle of, hang on, that's moving. So if that area is moving, we have to move as well from a psychological point of view. So that starts going up in value as well. Then you factor in finance again, the free flow of finance, not interest rates. It starts that whole cycle again because people are afraid of missing out, and especially how information is being pushed down various channels. The boom and bust mentality is going to be shorter and shorter. So what I'm saying here is that the cycles, your traditional cycles, so if you look at say Sydney, your traditional cycles was from bottom of the market to the next peak was 3 to 5 years. I reckon it's going to get smashed.
We
down
can see that in the charts now over the last decade. The timepiece between top to top.
Yeah. The cycles have been shorter and shorter.
Reduced. Just on your point in and around, I guess, the compression factor, and then further back to your point, Phil, around history leaves clues. If we go back to the GFC, I remember when the GFC, I guess, was kicking off, and we were saying to our clients that rents will increase dramatically in the affordable areas, and it'll be the affordable areas that kickstart the growth patterns again, which is about when you guys started purchasing, right? Yeah. We saw our rents in those affordable corridors throughout the country go up by some 30% in a very short period of time because in a very quick, I guess, way to explain it is during the GFC, obviously all asset prices dropped value, finance was hard to get, unemployment was high, there wasn't the serviceability to purchase, developers stopped building, yet the population still grew, and people scaled down in their livelihoods, whether it be owning or renting. And it compressed down to the affordable corridors throughout the country, which put more pressure on something that had no supply. Yeah. You fast forward to today, even up to the beginning of COVID, same thing. You look at now, fast forward to today, you look at those affordable corridors throughout the country, whether it be from a tenancy point of view or from a purchasing point of view, because investors will invest, the smart ones. So they're looking to where they can afford to invest with the right fundamentals. And it's those affordable corridors that are doing very, very well.
And they will continue to do so. That's where most of Australia lives, by the way.
That's where also most of the infrastructure is as well, because that's where the majority of Australia lives.
Yeah.
And so if we then play that out over the next 5 years, the problems of today will compound acutely for the following, 12 to 24 months or thereabouts. In other words, you'll see the data get worse and worse. We've just seen vacancy rates drop again. Side note, in the whole of the country, there's only about 33,000 properties for rent.
Right now.
Right
available.
now.
But this is where they reckon there's a whole bunch of ghost properties and all this sort of stuff of, yeah. But it's not a lot, really.
Well, so potentially misleading data. Here's another misleading data point, I guess. There are some suburbs that we're buying in today throughout the country that have, as of yesterday, in an entire suburb, 14 properties for sale.
For sale?
For sale. Yeah. That's it. But, right, so
that's just on the internet.
The bots pick that up, 14 properties for sale, right? But when you dig deeper, out of those 14 properties, 12 of them, this is as of yesterday, 12 of them are under contract.
Okay, so there's only 2 available
for sale. So there's only 2 available for sale. And then you can...
Which suburb is this? Postcode, something.
But, and we're not talking about a regional area here. Yeah, these are metro metro areas. I guess the point is, make sure you decipher the data correctly. But this whole problem is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. There is no magic solution to give the quick fix. So coming back to the Affordable Housing Accord, or whatever you want to call it, HAF, whatever it's called.
Some acronym.
The pain has yet to be solved. It is going to continue.
See, this is a point, I'll finish with this, and I made it during the COVID pandemic, right? And it's irrelevant today as what it was back then. How quickly, and whether they got it right or wrong, it's up for debate. How quickly did the government move when it really had to move? When it really had to move, how quickly it developed a policy around JobKeeper and said the key priority was to keep Australians in their jobs. We don't want unemployment because we don't want to pay unemployment benefits. That's bad. So let's incentivise companies to not sack their staff members, right? That policy was developed pretty quickly. Now, a lot of people would argue that stimulus has created the environment we're in right now, blah, blah, blah. But it goes to show how quickly the government can act if there is a genuine crisis, right? So on that same discussion point or that same vein, this mustn't be a genuine crisis because no one's acting very quickly.
No, I think it's not an acute. I think it's not an acute crisis, right? This crisis has been around.
It's always
forever.
been there.
Yeah, so that's why
I'm trying to give some sense of the size of the problem. It's always going to be there. Inherently, this is what is the key driver of real estate in Australia, the fact that there's not building enough housing. Always been the way.
Well, when you consider that it's just past $10 trillion in value being residential real estate, which is bigger than commercial superannuation and
All glued together.
Yeah. It shows you just how much wealth is tied up in residential real estate. And is it a question of, is it too big to fail?
Well, I reckon, woe betide anyone that tries to mess with everyone's rice bowl in Australia.
Well, they tried to do that back a couple of elections ago, right? And it failed dismally. But I think, look, and I know you're not being a conspiracist or what have you, but I think it will get to a point in time where the government, via pulling certain levers, whether that be influencing other sectors or governance, will act quickly.
So what needs to happen for this to be a problem that actually gets acted on quickly? Rather than just committees and more reports and, we've got to do this. Yeah, we're going to 100,000 affordable housing. That's a great idea. Good.
I think the answer to that is once they feel we've experienced enough pain.
Yeah.
And then they'll flick the switch. And that pain is really around inflation and so
but that's coming down. Monthly inflation numbers are sort of way down.
I know, but employment's not enough. Unemployment's not enough.
It's going up.
It is, but not at the rate they would like it to, which equals pain. So once they've hit that threshold of pain in their eyes, whatever it may be, like what it really needs to be, I think you'll see a flick.
Only more interest rate rises to make the pain.
That's a good question. I would not surprise me if we get one
this year.
Oh, I don't know.
Just before Christmas.
Well,
I know, but when does these new rules come in? They're only going to do it 8 times a year moving forward. So where's that start? Yeah, okay. So it's 8 interest rate decisions.
It'll
right?
depend on the spend, retail spend, I believe, during Christmas and how much, especially credit card debt and what have you, gets loaded up. Wouldn't surprise me if we got another just to really put the foot on the throat of the economy.
It's going to have to happen in November.
Yeah, but it wouldn't surprise me if we don't, because as you say, those numbers, the data's lagging, and depending on who you believe and what you read, it's all heading in the right direction, going, inflation down and so on and so forth. But I've given up trying to guess. We can have a punt.
Well, meat prices are half as what they were 12 months ago, 9 months ago. Meat's cheaper, a lot cheaper.
Well, when you buy your $200 steak, I mean,
no, I'm talking at a wholesale level. Farmers aren't getting the same price for their the meat than what they used to. It's cheaper at the grocery store. It's coming back. Building materials are coming down.
I know a little bit about meat.
I know you do.
It's my industry used to be, but it's not just that. It's not. It's what it's farm gate. It's just for the listener really quickly, because from paddock to plate is such a long way through so many hands. Yeah, it's a long distance to travel. Yeah,
freight costs are different. It's all coming down.
Labor.
Yeah.
It all adds up. So I'd say that's a little bit of a false flag.
Okay, there you go, false flag.
So we've got all of these moving parts: politics, supply, finance, and I guess everyone listening to it would think,
What's this
what do I
podcast
do?
about?
Yeah, the real
Don't do anything. Sit on your hands. Procrastinate.
Yeah. Well, what we're trying to really say over here is that don't bury your head in the sand, right? Look at your own finances. Look at your capability. Don't buy beyond your means, but look at your capability. Get into the market, because the other side of this dark time in property, if I can use that, is absolute sunshine, where we will have another surge of growth and very strong rentals. And you really can't look at it in isolation and say, property is just 3-month stint.
Yeah.
It is 3-4 years.
Property's
stint
not an election cycle.
No, it's not an election
Wow.
cycle.
Yeah.
Could be. Has some overlay.
Opportunities are always wrapped up in a problem.
Always.
That's
And
what Victor Kumar says.
That's what he says. And
That's what he says.
just one more point further to what Vic said is that if we get to a point in time, it's not a matter of if, it's when, we do see, I guess, if we're controlling the assets at the cost of money today with our rents, be fair to say, not going backwards. So let's keep them where they are.
Yeah.
And interest rates go down. Then obviously-
Arbitrage, heavy arbitrage.
It's one way to explain it. But just in closing, because I know we're going over time, but if we had have had this conversation, and we did have this conversation with many clients at the beginning of the year, and those that purchased from the beginning of the year through to today, on average, if we just take general market data, are in circa $48,000 better position today.
You don't want to
due
say
growth.
I told you so, but I told you so, is what you're saying.
No. What I'm saying is that number could be replicated from today. Fast forward.
So you haven't missed
12
it.
months.
You haven't missed
No.
it. You haven't missed the problem.
That's a good way to put it. You haven't missed the problem.
You haven't missed the problem. Good.
But the window is closing.
Window is closing. So for people who want to get there before the window closes, Victor,
You got to come through the door first.
You
So
Yeah, because if you're coming through the window, you're like, it could be a
That's
thief.
that's only in
could be a bit
Fiji.
sus.
yeah.
Yeah. Now there is a process, guys. You can reach out to us via the socials or send us an email, questions at rightpropertygroup.com.au. And Kate Kakatos, our business manager, will have a chat with you first. She is a successful property investor herself.
I know,
and
Kate.
her role is to make sure that when she sets up a time for either myself or Steve to have a meeting with you, that you're coming in armed with the right questions and the right information so that we can talk strategy.
Sounds good. Wow. Long one. Thanks for coming in, gents. It's always a pleasure. And Property Investing Insights of the Right Property Group. We'll be back, same place, same time next month. Maybe the problem's bigger. Who knows? We'll find out when we get there. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.